Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for being with us again today. It has been a long day for many of you. There have been many different panels, I believe very successful panels. And I am delighted to end the day of today with a major subject which has attracted our attention in the last 18 months, which is health and security. So I have the privilege to have with me a very powerful roundtable with experts from different sectors representing governments, international organizations, private sector, NGOs, and these experts have been, all of them, on their individual capacities, being involved in the last month, or in the last years, but in particular in the last month, in fighting both the pandemic, fighting the consequences of the pandemic, fighting the poverty issues related to this pandemic has created in the many developing countries, and fighting altogether the possibility of using this as a reset that will allow the current society to enter into a more productive phase and leaving this pandemic behind us as a lesson to the future. So I would like to leave each participant now the possibility to introduce themselves and spend a few minutes explaining who they are and where is their background. And then we will go into a Q&A session, a bit very open roundtable. And we will be also incorporating the questions that you can send to us through your Q&A facility in Zoom. And those questions will be either answered directly by the panelists individually, or will be answered in writing directly to the Q&A exchange. So, so maybe because we are in a subject that will also include some government officials, we are actually waiting for Mr. Poja, which is the Minister of Health of the Canton of Geneva, to join us during the roundtable. He's obviously very busy today as Biden and Putin are in Geneva, and this is a very big day for Geneva government. But I believe we will be able to host him during at least a few minutes to give us his perspective from Geneva. But maybe because we are from this government international organization perspective, and because I would say that one of the international agencies that has more responsibility towards facilitating international transfer of people, which is what we all want to do, is IATA. Maybe I just open with you, Pascal, as a quick introduction first, who you are and what you do, and then we will continue with the rest of the speakers. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Carlos. So yes, I am Pascal Bouchenet. I'm the Chief Information Officer for IATA. So IATA is the International Air Transport Association, and we are responsible of the safety standards, working closely with ICAO. We are also responsible of all the ticket distribution via travel agencies. And of course, I will explain to you what we are doing to restart our industry, and especially I will focus on Travel Pass, which is an application that is aiming to facilitate the passenger experience in the airport while staying in compliance with the COVID obligation. I have been at IATA for the last 10 years. IATA has been, changing quite a lot to adapt to the situation. In the past, it was all about, the growth of our industry, but now it is really about the biosafety and also the impact on the environment. So the sustainability and of course the reduction of the carbon emission. And it is really important that we continue to protect the safety of the passenger, whether it is their physical safety, whether it is their biosafety, but also whether it is also the safety of the planet.
Thank you very much, Pascal. So we go maybe to the second Pascal in the meeting, Pascal Tetterman.
All right, thank you, Carlos, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Pascal de Timmerman, and I'm the CEO of eLoop. eLoop is a Swiss startup based in Valais. We have as well a few, let's say, agency, for example, one in France. And eLoop, we started, let's say, early 2020. I'm an engineer, and as well I'm an entrepreneur. And we have, let's say, started the eLoop journey with my co-founder, with a medical doctor. And basically, eLoop, the bottom line is we wanted to develop a platform on blockchain. And I think today, blockchain, this conference is a big focus on that. And the other thing as well, we've been in the healthcare industry for over 25 years. And what we've seen is that most of the time, when let's say, engineers develop something for the doctors, for the medical, you always end up on their desk and they have to do the job. I mean, idea about this platform was one, blockchain, very secure, RGPD 100%. The other thing was to have really it's the patient or the citizen. If we talk about vaccine, it's more maybe citizen in general, that is in the center of all the process. I mean that he has to enter all the information, him or herself. And the only thing is that the medical doctor will certify those information. And we believe that it's very key because, then you offload the work, let's say, from the doctor. I mean, we'll talk about it a little later, but basically the application has been running since December 2020. As I said, it's on blockchain, and our first application is called Peak, and which basically it's a let's say the Peak. Let's say it's I wouldn't call a passport because it's not very, but it's a personal carnet, if you wish, which basically take all your vaccine. I mean that any kind of vaccine, of course, today we talk mainly about the COVID. But we basically, if you travel and if you go to a country like Peru or like XYZ, you won't be asked only to provide a certification about the COVID, but as well about, let's say, yellow fever or whatever. I mean that it's key that right now some government in Europe and as well in the world have, let's say, focused mainly on COVID, which is absolutely understandable because it's a big crisis. But we, let's say, already started before the COVID crisis, and our, let's say, motto was really to provide any citizen with a, let's say, a digital, let's say, passport, who can, let's say, be shown to any border control or whatever, or as well within a country. And so far it's been tested with about 20,000 or almost 25,000 patients and almost 1,000 doctors. And very successfully, we've been in pilot, mainly in France, and now we are, let's say, expanding. We believe as well it's very complementary to what, some government has been doing for the short term for the COVID, and we're looking at the longer term approach. And we as well meeting a number of new standards who are basically being developed, and I'm sure we'll hear about it with some of the speakers today. But for example, the VCI, which is a Vaccination Credential initiative, we're part of it. And as well, there are a number of others as well, but it's still in the process right now because it's something quite new. I mean that this is all about the eLoop and specifically the Peak, and I'm happy to answer any question.
Thank you very much, Pascal. Yeah, I think we will deep dive on the technology, and I will call it maybe into the interoperability of the technology, because there are so many solutions out there, and some of them, they're just not compatible. And I guess this is a very good opportunity to create a global interoperability where international standards are integrated in all these solutions. But we will get there in due time during this event. Maybe Benjamin from Seychelles.
Carlos, thank you, and welcome everyone. On my side, I am the Principal Secretary, or the PS, responsible for ICT in the Seychelles. We have been quite taken up with information systems, obviously, to support Ministry of Health and responses. And I think interoperability is something which is critical for us. My background myself, I'm in theoretical physics originally before going into ICT. So change of field. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Benjamin. Maybe Vaya, PMI.
Absolutely. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Vaya Sarlichiotti. So I'm currently working in Philip Morris on the capacity of global tech and innovation. on the domain of, let's say, the beginning of our supply chain in the tobacco leaf sourcing and cultivation. My background is the AgTech, so I come with 20 years of experience from academia, NGOs, startups, and now in Philip Morris. So I've worked in different capacities and I've seen it from different angles, if you want. And but my decision to join Philip Morris a few big years back was that it is a company under transformation, and within this transformation, let's say the social sustainability, the responsibility that a commercial international company should have is about social sustainability, is about supporting this farmer base. So for me, what I love in my job is that I have a very big scope to bring a lot of new innovation, state of the art, but really have an impact on people that they are what we call in the developing countries. So it's how to use technology for good, how to use technology to create resilient communities in Africa, in Indonesia, in Asia, in Latin America.
Thank you very much, Ryan. Ain, please.
Yes, thank you. I'm honored to be in such a distinguished panel member. I'm the Chief Medical Officer at the technology company originating from Estonia, but now headquartered in Lausanne and reaching globally into 40 countries. And my current job is really to help to combine my medical background, being trained as a medical doctor, but then also having been working in the technology domain. So I usually do things what I would label as technology intensive transformation in healthcare. Previous job being the Undersecretary for E-Services and Innovation in Estonia for the government, and now helping to use cryptographic technologies to enable distributed exchange of information by various stakeholders in cross-boundary setting. And even though the Estonian government started to work with the WHO prior the COVID crisis, for the last 12 months, the main focus has been to enable different countries, but also different stakeholders within a country to implement effective vaccination campaigns. And there has been a lot of discussion around the certificates or COVID passports. Yeah, we also brought to the market one of the first ones in Europe. Now we have successfully transformed that to be compatible with the EU COVID passport. But actually on the background, one of the ideas for us is that this certificate telling something about a medical procedure actually should also be providing assurance that, for instance, the vaccine that was in the original place used for that vaccination is reliable and trustworthy. So now working with the UNICEF in order to combine or basically bring together the trustworthy supply chain of vaccines so that there are no counterfeit vaccines, so that there is no diversion of vaccines with that of the healthcare procedure, and then also enabling with the help of these technologies to manage effective supply and demand with good quality healthcare processes, but also high efficiency supply chains. So that it's a complex exercise, as we've all seen. The technology is an important bit, but obviously, as we've all seen, it contains also a lot of politics and different stakeholder interest management. So happy to share both the technology, but also the policy part of the whole exercise. Thank you.
Thank you, Aina. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's an essential point, policy, and how can we use this situation to create some uniformity on those policies. So maybe on that, Jeffrey, your large experience in working with international organizations, the UN and others on travel and tourism.
Yeah, thanks, Carlos. I'm actually here today as a director of a startup company, which is called Way to Go. And Way to Go is, the best way I can describe it, is a digital Swiss Army knife for travelers, so that they have everything that they need in a trip in one place. It's an electronic wallet. It has some fundamental elements of fundamental characteristics. we believe it will help people to travel in a safe, fast, and climate-friendly way. And just to quickly give you a flavor of it, I'm sure we'll talk about it more, we are working very closely with Carlos because one of the most important things for everybody nowadays is security. And so we organized to build this electronic wallet on the security that WiseKey has been developing for some years. But most importantly, we also have a health application. There's an enormous diversity of health requirements differing from country to country and changing from month to month as the virus mutates and evolves. And if you're a traveler, whether it's before your trip, whilst you're on your trip, or even on the way back, you need to be aware of what those changing requirements are. And our wallet makes a space for this, a compartment for this. And we also have a compartment for the kind of information that people like IATA have been developing for speeding customers through border control, because until we had COVID, that was one of the big challenges. And then last but not least in this dimension, we have a whole, what I call the green component, which travel companies are booking with a green claim, which are there restaurants which claim to be bio and eco-friendly. And last but not least, how can I offset my travel? All of these applications will be contained in one electronic wallet called Way2Go. Now, I'm sure we'll get into that. My background is not in that field at all. I'm in essence, a former bureaucrat. I worked for IATA for 20 years. I was the executive director when I left. I then worked as the first president of the World Travel and Tourism Council, which is now the biggest private sector organization in the travel and tourism company. And then for the last 10 years of my active working life, I was the Assistant Secretary General at the UN World Tourism Organization, and in fact, the delegate to the World Health Organization's interagency committee that was dealing with SARS and avian flu at the time. So I have that kind of a knowledge of how the international community works. Today, I'm president of an NGO which is partnered with the government of Malta. It's called SunX Malta, Strong Universal Network. And our focus is on climate change, because climate change is the existential issue on the agenda of everybody in the world. And we're trying to help make travel what we call climate friendly, low carbon, linked to the Sustainable Development Goals, and absolutely tracking the Paris 1.5 agreement.
Thank you very much, Jeffrey. Your extensive experience both in the diplomacy and now technology is essential to understand the complexities and how can we handle them. So now, Murat, please, Murat, you are very active in Davos with the Caspian Week. You are a major thought leader on the subject in the region, and you are now launching projects on this. So your experience will be of high interest to everybody. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Carlos. My background also theoretical physics, but I switched to business on the very, very early stage, right after graduation from the university. And since more than 20 years, I'm in business, and we have quite diversified business, various projects, core business, the international trading and logistics, but also recently moved massively to the digital technologies. And the project, which I will talk a little bit today, is called Global System for Preparedness for Disease X, which is highly relevant to the COVID-19 pandemic, but more important for the future potential pandemics and epidemics which will come. And also, like you mentioned, I'm leading the Greater Caspian Association, which is organizing Caspian Week Forum in Davos every year, except 2021, for obvious reasons. We were able to do this. Hope to restart doing this again. And this is a non-profitable social responsibility initiative dedicating for the development of the Greater Caspian region. Now coming back a little bit to the health topic, I will just highlight about the GSPDX project. If we will, I think we will talk a lot today about the testing, the cybersecurity for this information and so on, but there are a few comments on this. First is each test will have 72 hours normally time lag. You are doing test, and then you do what you want. And then during these 72 hours, you can travel, you can cross the border and so on. And during these 72 hours, you can normally get infected and you can start spread infection. And this is one comment. Second is the accuracy of the tests. It could be false negative, could be false positive. And another problem is authentication of the test, because now we know a lot of cases about fake tests, fake paper, fake test results. Even some people, they are not doing tests, but getting a real report with registered in the databases and so on and so on. It is very difficult later on to determine what was real, what was not. It's in many countries. Even now you can get the fake vaccination certificate or passport in some countries. You are not going to vaccination, you are just taking the paper and that's all. And I think here that since the beginning of COVID pandemic, and we got this lesson that we are running after the departing train. There is a problem, and we are trying to deal with the consequences. And our project, which we are developing, is trying to not to prevent, but trying to help the society to detect on the earliest possible stage the new unknown pathogens, which will come, or even do the live detection of the existing pathogens, including COVID-19. I will come to this a little bit later, and this is my relevance to this panel. And I'm glad to participate. I'm quite new in the healthcare sector, less than 1 year, but on my another background, because all my family are doctors, and all my childhood I was reading medical books instead of something else. Okay, thank you very much, Carlos, and then I will come to this back later.
Thank you, Murat. I know you and how you act in Davos, you will learn very, very fast. So I'm confident that you're going to become a major authority in the subject. So maybe we go back into the technology, because a lot of this discussion is around technology, and they are what I call the early adopters of the technology, the winners, I say, and they are already solving some concrete issues. They are creating others, and they are the followers, which are trying to, advance their platforms. And there's a lot of discussions about the use of cybersecurity. That's one thing WISeKey does, right? I mean, we support many projects by bringing identity management, cybersecurity, because at the end of the day, this is nothing new. I mean, the certification of people, issuing digital identities to make sure that the person is the person says they are, digitally signing documents, PDF signing, using PKI and blockchain interception to decentralize records. This has been there for many, many years. The only new thing here is because COVID is accelerating the digital transformation of countries, because they are realizing that if they react fast and efficient, they will not damage as much their economies and their citizens and their health. So, but again, it's a lot of, as we all know, it's a lot of hype on technology. There are things that they are real, and there are others that they are less. So maybe I'm going to revert now back to Pascal, because I really believe Travel Pass has done something very concrete, and Travel Pass it establishes the compliance between the airlines and government, which is required to create some kind of international and interoperable standard. So Pascal, maybe guide us or educate us on Travel Pass. What is Travel Pass? How do you handle private information? Just a few minutes on that. And what is your experience in the deployment?
Yes, Carlos, sure. So Travel Pass is an application that aims to facilitate the experience at the airports. The problem that we are trying to solve is that if we have only 25% of the volume of passenger that we had in 2019. With the current regulation that we have around COVID, it will result in queues in the airports that will last more than 2, 3, or 4 hours. And of course, it is not good also for the social distancing. So Travel Pass is an application that will allow the passenger to check his compliance with the COVID requirement from home. And then when he will arrive at the airport, he will be already pre-checked, and actually he will be able to use, the self-service kiosk and everything that we have put already in the airport. So the way Travel Pass works is that you create with the app. So it's an app that you download on both the Apple Store and the Android Store, and you are able to create your own identity, and we verify your own identity with your passport. And so there is 2 ways. Either we are using the NFC, either we are using also the MRZ, which is the small zone when you can read also the passport. And then we are using the biometric of the phone to verify that you are the person that you are pretending to be. So once you have your digital ID, you can import your itinerary into the app, and then you will understand exactly what are the regulations for your destination. So what you need to do, when, how many days before, everything that is required. And then you will know also what are the labs that will be able to give you a test. At the moment, Travel Pass is working with a test result, but we are ready also to include also the vaccine certification. And we know that in many countries, whether it is Europe or Switzerland, by end of June, this vaccine certificate will be available. So then after, you can go to the lab, and the lab is going also to verify your ID, and is going to link your ID with the result of the test. And we are using some nice technology. So everybody is using blockchain. We are using blockchain also. And so we are using the concept of verifiable identity or credential or decentralized credential. And what was important for us is that the verifier should be able to verify your document without sharing personal data. Because airline, we don't want to become responsible of personal data, especially if we are talking about health data about our passenger. So we are happy to build secure pipes that will allow the passenger to share their data, but we don't want, of course, to manage, and we don't want to touch this data, which is a good way to comply with data privacy regulation and GDPR in particular. And so the application at the end, when you will receive your test report, will give you an OK to travel, and this OK to travel can be sent to the custom, to the airline, and to all the gates that are checking, of course, your compliance. And so this is how it works, and everything remains under the control of the passenger, because it is the passenger who decide by using the app, so scanning a QR code, that will decide to give his digital identity to the lab, so the lab can associate the test, give the digital identity to the border control, so they can check that you have the good test or you have the good vaccine certificate, and so on and so. And you mentioned something that is really important. IATA is working at the moment with 69 airlines, and we are testing Travel Pass on 141 routes. And by definition, we IATA, we are dealing with global environment. And you're right that every country has different framework. Even if everybody agrees that we need to have standards, even if we are working with WHO in order to define global standards, the reality is for vaccine certificate, for regulation, it changes everywhere. And so it's important that we give a unique platform so the passenger will be able to check in advance what he needs to have to comply, because we don't want him to go to the airport and then after to realize that he cannot board in the plane because of something. So this is the idea of Travel Pass. And again, in terms of data privacy protection, there is absolutely no personal data on the system, all the personal data stays in the wallet of the mobile phone. And of course, it is the passenger who is responsible of the security of his mobile phone. And then it is the passenger always to decide to whom he wants to give the information, so we can test, the credential without having access to the personal data.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Decentralization of identity and attributes of the identity, which is what I am on that identity, needs to be decentralized and needs to be under the control of the person. That's the spirit of WiseKey and the entire thing we do as well. So, so that's a very concrete step towards. I have been in Seychelles with you, Benjamin. We actually doing something on identity for the country. I was very impressed about the process of onboarding into Seychelles. You have to download the app, you have to scan your travel documents, you have to scan your COVID certificate, your vaccination certificate. All that creates a QR code, which is a secure QR code. And when you arrive into the country with that QR code, you just get in basically as a facilitated check-in. And that QR code can then be used in hotels, can be used basically everywhere in the country. So this model of bringing everything into one identity is something which makes Seychelles very special. Maybe some views on that, and maybe some reaction also to Pascal, because obviously Seychelles is a major tourist destination.
Thank you, Carlos. I'm actually very interested in what Ayata has said. As you are right, Carlos. I mean, in the case of Seychelles, we had to, because of our high dependency on tourism, we had to respond much faster, which is why we deployed that sort of system. And as you are aware, we are also we had to do vaccination very fast, and even the testing. So we have similar systems. I mean, even for vaccination, that people are getting their paper certificates, but we also have a digital version, which is digitally signed, and that can also be verified. Now, I think in our case we had no choice. We had to do it quickly, and maybe our size scale allowed us to do this, and we had the infrastructure and the means to do it. However, I have to raise maybe 2 points. I think for Ayata, our interest is how in such sort of global systems can systems we already have presently be interfaced with in order to work. I think that because I do not think that every country will have one unique homogeneous system. I think you will end up with very heterogeneous systems. Like in our case, it's very hierarchical in terms of PKI usage, etc. But I take the point on blockchain. When you go at the scale level, you will need that sort of distributed solutions. I would say that's one. How do we, in our case, would be how do we I'm not sure whether integration is the right word, but rather how do we interface and interoperate with that? I think I would expect that there must be some flexibility for that, and also in the case of Seychelles, very early on, even though we had deployed the technology for that Carlos has described, we started having issues with fake PCR tests, for example. So because in our case, we have another industry, which is fisheries, and a lot of the big companies here are actually from Europe, and they make use of sailors from all over the world. So you started getting issues about how reliable or credible the PCR tests are. And so my second point is, how do you handle, because not all countries will necessarily have all the technological setup. How do we balance that? Because presumably everyone will want to go in that direction. But in our case, as I've explained, in the case of PCR tests, we had tests coming out of, for example, West Africa. We had issues with, and when they came to Seychelles, when control tests were done, were found to be not the correct results, and the occurrence is more than what you would expect in terms of statistical occurrences. Thank you, Carlos.
Thank you, Benjamin. Yeah, it's a very important question, which it is actually the question that we got always asked, mainly by governments. As you know, I was in the UN before founding WISeKey. For 15 years, I was doing PKI, interoperability between national identity systems. And when you go to a government, you say, hey, I come in with a final solution, you just can plug on it, and we do it for you. The reaction is always, but how can you ensure that the data stays at national level? How can you ensure that we have revocation rights over identities? How can you ensure that the interoperability of that identity is under our control and not somebody else's control? So this kind of solution, one solution fits all needs, is not applicable in what we call the governance aspect of identification. And maybe which I think is interesting, because we have another expert in the panel here, Ain from Estonia. Your Estonia became basically one of the most advanced countries in the world of identity. There was one of the first PKI countries, then put everything on digital identities. And now you are one of the leading countries in the world on the interoperability of identities in blockchain, which I guess is the foundation word for projects like Vaccine and others. So maybe can you walk us through that journey, or how you did it in the country? Because that lesson is a lesson that might be useful for other countries.
Thank you. Indeed, in the digital domain, I think that by today, most of the people have now realized that you need some sort of identity. I mean, if you want yourself to be recognized by multiple entities, and yet you as a person want those other entities in a way have the influence about the same person as yourself, you need to find ways how you maintain the privacy, how you maintain the control over what is happening on your behalf. But there needs to be some sort of unique way to present yourself. So that I think the first thing is to acknowledge that this is needed. And then the second part is, okay, what is then the governance? So in the case of PKI, the governance is it's well understood. But it's quite heavy technologically. And I think that some of you might have been involved in the efforts that the World Health Organization also started to work on the certificates. And when the conflict between the very narrow use case of the kind of the border pass and then the broader use case of care continuity came, then it was realized that exactly as Benjamin already mentioned, that the technological requirements are something that would at some point start hinder the global collaboration. And so having the identity, second, having the idea that the systems need to be distributed. There will not be one entity that governs all the activities, although there might be an entity, Estonia is a small country, where at least the identity management is governed. Now, globally, that probably means that there is, and this is what we have been promoting, that if in a country, whatever is the method of allocating those identities has been agreed, if then the other parties in the other countries would recognize that entity and in principle their method, then it is possible to start using technologies like blockchain, and then in a distributed manner kind of layer the trust. As an example, so I call this like a club principle. So if the first entry to the club is that you need to identify maybe just an organization, but anyway, there needs to be some access control to the agreed service. And then what those services are, for instance, for travel pass, for instance, care continuity, I envisage that what we will gain from those platforms will be e-prescription and many other services. But all those services independently do not need to agree on every possible kind of way how the data is managed. For passporting, we just heard the requirement by the border guard is much narrower than for a healthcare professional, for whom much more extensive information about you is required. But both of them need assurance that if you present them a document about the health status, then it is about you and the integrity of that data is protected. So that if, so to say, people are allowed or organizations are allowed into the club based on their digital identity, within the club, they can form smaller groups, agree on smaller set of services and the roles and principles, as long, there are probably some, cardinal sins, you can't cheat and so on. But the digital identity really allows, and you shouldn't tie to the digital identity, for instance, in the case of individual address and all the other baggage information that I know that, for instance, when Japan followed and tried to introduce the ID card, the problem was that the identity actually carried too much information and then there was a privacy attached to that. So identity is a very small bit. And then when you start combining that identity with others, then you will get similar kind of digital society as we have in Estonia, which means that, some people use all the benefits and all the services, and others, protect their data in a much more constrained way, but they can execute the right when they feel comfortable.
Yeah,
I hope that was useful.
Totally. Yes, identity is a big subject. I mean, I've been for years and years trying to crack the identity paradigm. There are philosophical views of identity, whether the identity belongs to you, belongs to your government, belongs to your health ministry, what is your PII, and there's international standard like X509. I mean, this is going to be an evolving method. Actually, I wrote a book about that where I say that identity should be owned by the person. Identity is a human right, digital identity. But maybe we're going to park that for a moment, and we're going to discuss about a second part of the COVID, which is the fact that we are unable, and this has been one of the failures of the G7, to be able to provide an efficient vaccination method for the entire world population, which can backfire back again to developed nations as the new variants are emerging. And if we let this pandemic without spreading, without control, that obviously will backfire back again to the countries that they are opening again. But one of the big issues from my experience dealing with that subject is the supply chain issue, distribution, right? And we have with us here maybe one of the largest supply chain experts, because the number of objects they move internationally, which is PMI. So Maya, how you use this innovation and big data and blockchain to face the challenges that you have in supply chain, and what this supply chain experience can be used for the current vaccination distribution of the vaccines internationally, especially in developing countries?
Absolutely. Look, for us, let's put it this way. If I could draw some parallels between the vaccination and what we do. I mean, when COVID pandemic started, okay, it was a matter that no one was prepared for it. We did not expect to have a COVID. We did not know how to do, but we did know as a global community is that we had this knowledge based on data, based on experience, based on the academic research of years of potentialities out there. So how can we make happen to have maybe the fastest vaccine of the past decades? I don't think that we ever had such a vaccine developed at such a short time, but this shows the need. Now, for us in supply chain, there are two things. I mean, as I said at the beginning, we are dealing in our supply chain with maybe the most vulnerable communities. We are sourcing from parts of the world that we do know that the farmers and the people in a supply chain are less affluent. They're maybe very close to poverty or under poverty line. So for us in Philip Morris, some years back, we take the decision and we said, okay, how can we, in our journey of transformation, ensure that these communities can actually achieve living income, achieve conditions, have access to health, have access to education, have access to food, okay? So let's say if the parallel on this is that what we did is that said, what do we have? We have a lot of data points. We have knowledge of our farmer base. We've been working with them for decades. So we have a lot of understanding to the granular level of the small, I would say, a village in Malawi or a village somewhere in Indonesia. We know which our farmers are. We know what their problems are. And then the question was, okay, how can we use new technologies to actually support them? So for us, the first step was, let's take the data. Let's start looking at the data. Let's use big data analytics and all the development that we have in AI and machine learning and start seeing how can we target initiatives to them. I mean, for better or for worse, in AgTech, in this kind of space, we're in a new revolution space. It mainly started because of the data and access to sensors. But always these developments usually focus to the developing countries. So it focuses in US, it focuses on Brazil, it focuses in EU. So what we did and what we said is, let's take the data, let's target to understand what are the underlying causes that create the problem that we have identified, child labor, living income, access to protective equipment. And then let's use this technology to create a supply chain and target our initiatives. And I think this kind of approach that started earlier than the pandemic, we are already 10 years in our program in social sustainability, allow us not only to, let's say, plan the past. First of all, it allows us to respond to the needs of the pandemic. So we're very fast to respond as a corporate to the needs of the farmers. So we were able during the pandemic to release about more than 100 initiatives targeting. We changed our supplies to produce, for example, alcohol solution. At the time that there was a lack of alcohol solution even to Europe, we created a mask. We distributed this mask. We reached out network to ensure that we educate these farmers that they have access to proper information to know how to fight the pandemic. So we managed to limit, let's say, the exposure in our direct communities. But for us, is the step after the pandemic. So our target here and our vision is, how can we ensure that when we face the new pandemic, when we face the new climate, let's say, crisis, because this is what affects our supply chain, we are ready to respond. So currently our focus, if you want, is preparing for events that we don't know when they will happen, but we do know that they'll happen with a certainty, to secure our communities against droughts, floods, all the things that comes with the climate change. So today, as we speak, I'm happy to say that we're not only exporting technology that is state-of-the-art for Europe, but we're actually developing technology to target these smallholder communities. This is anything from satellite to imaging to big data to mobile networks to access to electricity. That's why what we want to achieve is secure our farmer base and make sure that they are resilient. So whatever happens, of course, there's going to be an impact, but the impact needs to be limited because we're talking about people that they are very close to the edges of the living income. So this is, let's say, the response, and I would say our responsibility as well.
It's actually a very interesting point how a big multinational is handling and using their force to assist groundbreaking initiatives like that. I had this morning a panel with International Red Cross, the National Committee for the Red Cross, because we're talking about NFTs, about how NFTs can be used as a way of providing philanthropic donations to NGOs like the Red Cross to support the activities. And the gentleman from the Red Cross was saying that sometimes when they go to developing countries and say, can we help you with food? The answer is, no, don't help me with food. Just give me Wi-Fi and a mobile phone, and I'll find the food myself. So that means that the new way of helping people is not just by basic needs, as maybe was the previous generation. Now, you with a mobile phone and a good connection, you can basically sell your services anywhere in the world. You can get paid with cryptocurrencies. So this is the kind of new thinking which I think is important for us to consider as an economic development. So I'll come back to you later, more questions about how you are handling that. But maybe one point which and I know that Pascal, you are time constrained. So you are, as a startup, you have developed many companies now. You are focusing on putting your efforts and money on this new initiative. What would you ask to organizations like the ones that you have here in this roundtable or others to support your initiative? What do you need in terms of technology back support, sharing data, complying with international standards? What will be the list of things that you will need to succeed in your endeavor?
Thank you, Carlos. No, I think it's an excellent question. What we've seen so far is that, of course, a number of countries, and we understand why, including Switzerland, that they try to play that role in terms of developing their own solution. And as you know, a number of countries in Europe have done that. I mean, without naming that, I'm sure you know, and as well, Switzerland, where we are as well. Now, what we would be as a startup, and I think we have a lot of let's say, expertise into the digital world, and specifically in the healthcare one, we would, we would look for government, for WHO, for IATA and other organizations to really, let's say, come with standard. And I think so far, for our point of view, it's been lacking. I mean, we've been in close touch with the European Commission. And of course, they are working on a number of things, but they're working as well on solution, direct solution. And I think that we would, expect more support for the enterprise and the private sector to be able to, let's say, to help, I mean, the world in order to come with something, as you said before, that is fully integrated and interoperable with anything, in the world. As an example, if you have a system done in France or in Switzerland or in Denmark, obviously there are local things, even if they might have a certificate that can be, let's say, seen, if you go to the US or something, but can you imagine let's say a border control or let's say any kind of authority, and he's going to see those, millions of different type, or maybe not million, but thousands of different type of, let's say, certificate without really a standard across the board. And I understood the travel pass. It's a good idea about, let's say, for traveling, but if you travel by car or if you travel by boat or whatever, I mean, IATA, it's not going to provide, I guess, the specific, let's say, answer. I mean, that what we would look, it's really to have something that, let's say, is really the government and all the body. I think we are in Geneva, and I think it's probably the best, let's say, place in the world to do that. And this is what really we would be looking at as soon as possible to really provide the industry. Switzerland is really a driven economy, let's say, motto, and they are really driving it since a long time. But I think on that one, we've been lacking, let's say, guidance. And another thing as well that I would add, the journey of a passenger or of a traveler, or even if you don't travel, some countries might use it as well to go to a theater or something. It's really start with the citizen, and the citizen was the doctor. And I think that what we've seen now, we've seen, thousands of people, millions of people have been vaccinated. All those things are in certain database per country. And certainly they're gonna, let's say, send it to those, let's say, country or European passport, and they're gonna validate it. We strongly believe that it starts with the patient or citizen and the doctor. This is where the relationship should be, and a doctor should every time certify the information, because we've seen many fraud around, let's say, since the beginning of COVID. And I think that if you don't have, if you're not sure, let's say, that the certification is being done by a professional, a healthcare professional who's, let's say, eligible to do that, anybody can do it, because even if you have any kind of, let's say, passport and you travel and you check, it's not going to be that straightforward. I mean, again, our motto is really the citizen and the doctor should be, let's say, connected very closely.
Thank you, Pascal. Yeah, maybe we should suggest to take away the second A on IATA, so it becomes International Transportation Association and not only airlines. Yeah, I guess you got it right. I mean, this transportation will, it's going to be totally disruptive, and I think what is happening, the model of IATA will inspire many other transportation-related industries, right? Because they will need this kind of control process. Yeah. I am a bit curious, Murat, about the regional aspect of this. I mean, doing this for one country is difficult already. Doing that for a region like Caspian region, although I guess Caspian region, you know, shares a lot of the regional values, language, tradition, history. But will each of those countries recognize each other? How that will play in a regional environment, this type of technologies?
Okay, it's not an easy question because this should be individual approach for each particular country and the government of the country. And I think here the approach coming from the international organizations like IATA or United Nations or relevant structure will be most successful. Because if you will try to give this initiative to the region, then there will be a main issue who will lead the initiative inside the region. And then most probably there will be no consensus on this, because everybody would like to be at least equal, but everybody also would like to be the first between the equal. And
Sure.
here we should have really international organizations approach. And but if this will be good recommendations, neutral one and acceptable for the region, for the countries, for the governments, I think this could be really adopted. And the good thing in the region that there is a normally in our region there is a very strong vertical integration of power. It means if decision is taken, it's taken. No disputes that whether it was correct or not, that and this and so on. At least in our region, we are not going to the referendums for each for each important topics. It's mainly the government decision. And here, I think there is a good opportunity. And even for our project, for the Global System for Preparedness for Disease X, we think that the best chance to do the pilot project will be in the region. And we already discussed with 2 countries of the region, and one of these countries already confirmed that they would like to host the pilot project. And it's just a government decision. No discussion, just a decision, and then they're going to implement. But also another topic is that now supply of tests and even supply of vaccines is very, very fragmented into the region. Everybody, each country, even on the private level, they're buying getting this from the various sources. And in the same country, you can have like 5 or 6 different vaccines. I'm not talking about the tests. And that's why it will be also important for the region to consolidate this information somewhere. And again, this cannot be done in the region for the same reasons like I explained. This should be done most probably outside on the international organizations level. Like maybe to create a task force on the IATA or United Nations or World Health Organization, which will target the Greater Caspian region and try to implement all these initiatives there. And this will be, I think, the winning approach.
Thank you very much, Murat. I fully agree. I think this region is a very good case study for many other regions, including what Seychelles is also doing in Africa. You know, as member of communities, then they can learn from each other, because it is nearly impossible for some countries, especially for small countries, to be able to do alone by themselves. We have the pleasure to have with us the Minister of Health of Geneva, Mr. Poja. So thank you very much for making the time to join us. I know it's a very busy day for you in Geneva today with the president of the both presidents. So Mr. Poja, you have around the table different experts from different organizations such as IATA in Geneva, which, as you know, have developed the travel pass. You have also representative from private sector. You have representative from the government of Seychelles, which are deploying very large scale systems to facilitate the opening of the economy so they can welcome back tourists. And Geneva has been one of the cities, I would say, with more lessons to learn, not only because you managed to handle the pandemic from day one in a very efficient way, but also because you're interacting with international organizations and they have a global role in the pandemic, such as WHO, IATA, ITU, and others. So I know that you are very busy and we don't want to take a lot of your time, but maybe you can share with us your experience during this pandemic period in handling the situation, and where is your advice for the future? The floor is yours.
Merci, merci. Est-ce que vous permettez que je m'exprime en français?
Oui, bien sûr. Après, je ferai la traduction en anglais.
Donc, je vais parler en bon français et pas en genevois. Voilà. Merci d'abord pour cette invitation. Merci à toutes celles et ceux qui sont avec nous. Vous avez raison. Effectivement, notre situation au sein de l'épidémie dans laquelle nous sommes encore, il faut le dire, il ne faut pas croire qu'elle soit derrière nous, nous a beaucoup appris, évidemment, dans le domaine du numérique et de la protection des données. Et je dirais que l'élément le plus évident aujourd'hui est la question du certificat Covid. Vous savez qu'on parle beaucoup de ce Covid Pass au niveau européen. Et même si la Suisse n'est pas formellement dans l'Union européenne, il est évident que les ressortissants suisses, les habitants de la Suisse sont de grands voyageurs et voyagent beaucoup dans le monde, mais principalement dans l'Union européenne. Et rien n'est fait à ce niveau-là sans une coordination avec les autorités européennes. Donc, il est évident qu'aujourd'hui, le grand défi que nous avons est celui de mettre à disposition des personnes qui sont, j'utilise pour moyen mnémotechnique TGV, c'est-à-dire les gens qui sont testés, qui sont guéris ou vaccinés, et bien leur mettre à disposition un moyen comme celui-là pour pouvoir justifier de leur immunité. Et là, nous avons des grands défis. D'abord, il faut savoir que nous avons des personnes peut-être dans le panel qui sont moins familiarisées avec le système helvétique, mais en Suisse, nous avons évidemment l'échelon politique fédéral, puis l'échelon politique cantonal. La question du certificat Covid est évidemment une question qui ne pouvait être réglée qu'au niveau national quant aux conditions dans lesquelles le certificat pouvait être et doit être établi. Les cantons, et en l'occurrence Genève, et je représente le canton dans ce domaine, c'est à eux de mettre en œuvre ce certificat. Donc la Confédération a posé les règles, et parmi ces règles, il y a une règle fondamentale, et tout ce qui touche la santé est encore plus sensible, je dirais, à cette question fondamentale qui est celle de la protection des données. C'est une vérité dans tous les domaines lorsqu'on touche des dossiers, des fichiers, mais dans le domaine de la santé, je dirais que la sensibilité de la population à cet égard est encore plus exacerbée que dans les autres domaines. Donc la Confédération qui aujourd'hui doit coordonner l'émission de ce certificat Covid doit travailler avec les fichiers qui ont été constitués par les cantons sous la responsabilité des services cantonaux de la santé et des médecins cantonaux. Quand je parle du médecin cantonal, c'est un rôle de droit public, hein, c'est le médecin cantonal, ce ne sont pas les médecins du canton, c'est le responsable sanitaire, je dirais, du canton. Nous avons aujourd'hui des données qui ont été recueillies de la part des personnes vaccinées. Je prends l'exemple des personnes vaccinées avec nom, prénom, date de naissance et évidemment date de la vaccination, généralement double vaccination. Et ces fichiers, évidemment, doivent être déplacés sur l'application mise à disposition par la Confédération pour pouvoir générer ce certificat Covid. Et ce passage des données du fichier cantonal à l'application fédérale a dû être réglementé au niveau du droit fédéral et nous avons à ce niveau-là une ordonnance du Conseil fédéral qui est l'exécutif national du 4 juin 2021 qui pose déjà le principe de base selon lequel aucune transmission de données ne peut intervenir sans l'accord préalable du détenteur des droits, c'est-à-dire le patient vacciné. Donc, nous avons dû mettre en place un système extrêmement lourd qui va maintenant se déployer d'ici la fin du mois de juin, d'aller interpeller chacune des 300 000 personnes, c'est la population actuellement vaccinée à Genève, qui a reçu cette vaccination pour lui demander si elle accepte que ses données personnelles, nom, prénom, date de naissance, vous voyez que c'est peu de choses finalement, mais c'est quand même ce qui est un droit de la personnalité, soit transférées à l'application. La Confédération met à disposition 2 applications, une application qui s'appelle la COVID Certificate, qui est celle qui va générer le certificat. Dès que les données sont reçues, elle génère le certificat et les données sont immédiatement détruites au niveau de la Confédération. Donc, rien n'est conservé par la Confédération. Et simultanément, il y a une autre application qui, elle, est différente, qui permet de lire les données pour celles et ceux qui auront le droit de vérifier si le QR code donne la possibilité d'accès, notamment pour voyager, qui est la COVID Certificate Check. Ce sont ces 2 applications. Donc, si vous voulez, la mise au point de quelque chose qui semble finalement assez simple, c'est démontrer de manière sécurisée que la personne peut exercer certaines activités, dont principalement celle de voyager, et bien sécuriser les données, sécuriser leur lecture, et tout cela avec le contrôle du patient, parce que tout ça est sous le chapeau de notre droit fédéral sur la protection des données. Voilà, je dirais, la dernière manifestation évidente du domaine de la protection des données dans le dossier médical, mais Genève a encore une tradition plus grande encore dans le domaine du dossier électronique du patient, puisque Genève est le premier canton suisse qui a commencé, il y a 20 ans maintenant, à mettre en place un dossier électronique du patient qui a pour fonction non pas de réunir dans un dossier avec tous les risques que cela impliquerait les données du patient, mais qui permet pour le titulaire d'un code d'accès qui est délivré par le patient d'aller lire les bases de données auprès des prestataires de soins qui seront entrés dans le système. Donc nous avons aujourd'hui 50 000 patients à Genève qui sont entrés dans le système du DEP, du dossier électronique du patient, qui, depuis lors, fait l'objet d'une réglementation fédérale et avec évidemment une base de données qui réunit maintenant l'ensemble des cantons qui ont adhéré dans une même communauté de prestataires, l'ensemble des cantons romans, ceux qui parlent français en Suisse, ont adhéré sous réserve de Neuchâtel à cette base de données dans une association qui s'appelle CARA et qui bientôt va pouvoir mettre à disposition de l'ensemble des patients de toute la région francophone de la Suisse un accès sécurisé au dossier médical dont le but principal est évidemment de permettre aux patients d'avoir accès en tout temps à ses propres données, mais aussi qui permet aux patients de choisir qui pourra avoir accès à ces données personnelles avec pour finalité une économie dans les coûts de la santé, une meilleure gestion de la prise en charge de patients avec des maladies chroniques, des maladies diverses, avec de nombreux prestataires de soins qui seront de cette manière-là coordonnés autour du dossier électronique du patient. Voilà, brièvement rappeler ce que Genève fait dans ce domaine. Je crois pouvoir dire, et je n'en ai pas de mérite personnel puisque cela a commencé bien avant que j'arrive au gouvernement genevois, que Genève est depuis maintenant des années à la pointe en Suisse dans le domaine du dossier électronique du patient avec les défis sécuritaires extrêmement importants que l'on connaît, défis sécuritaires qu'il faut absolument régler parce qu'aucun patient n'acceptera d'entrer dans un dossier électronique s'il n'est pas sûr, même si le 100%, on le sait, n'existe pas, mais s'il est sûr au moins qu'il a la maîtrise de qui a accès à ces données et avec une possibilité rétrospective de regarder qui a regardé quelles données dans son dossier médical.
Absolument, merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Ministre. Avant votre arrivée, on parlait avec Pascal Bouchner, qui est le CIO d'IATA, du projet Travel Pass, qui, comme vous savez, c'est un projet qui a pris une dimension mondiale. Il a plusieurs pays qui l'ont adopté, il a plusieurs grandes compagnies aériennes qui l'ont adopté. Et il nous expliquait un point essentiel, c'est l'identité digitale de la personne qui voyage. Il est fait qu'ils ont adopté la blockchain comme une façon de décentraliser cette identité pour éviter qu'on ait une base de données centralisée de l'identité dans laquelle, comme vous savez, les gens des fois se sentent un peu mal à l'aise par rapport au potentiel contrôle de cette identité. Comme vous savez, ici en Suisse, on a voté contre l'identité digitale. Est-ce que ça a été un bon choix? Est-ce que l'identité digitale ne pourrait pas renforcer tous ces modèles que vous avez décrits jusqu'à maintenant?
Je crois qu'évidemment, cette votation est regrettable de mon point de vue, mais je ne pense pas qu'elle signifie un arrêt de l'activité qui se fait dans ce domaine. Ce que le peuple, même s'il est toujours difficile de savoir ce que dit finalement une population qui dit non à un projet, mais il semble que la crainte, c'était de permettre à des entités privées de générer cette identité, ce code d'identité électronique. Ils considèrent, même si on peut discuter longuement sur cela, que le fait que l'État lui-même puisse assumer cette responsabilité est source de garanties supplémentaires. Je pense qu'il y a une crainte fondamentale que les données personnelles soient transférées sans l'accord du titulaire à des tiers. Et dans la population, cette crainte est plus grande si le maître du dossier, si j'ose dire, est une entité privée et non pas publique. Mais si je prends l'exemple de Genève, nous avons mis en place, et bientôt elle sera à disposition dans quelques semaines, une identité électronique qui permettra, notamment pour le dossier électronique du patient, mais aussi pour d'autres activités. On imagine les données fiscales de chaque personne, c'est pour entrer dans l'administration et dans les secrets de l'administration pour ce qui concerne nos données personnelles. Eh bien, cette identité électronique que celles et ceux qui le voudront pourront obtenir a été mise au point à l'interne par les services de l'État avec toutes les sécurités. Pour l'instant, tous les contrôles externes que l'on a fait faire, tous les audits démontrent une fiabilité maximale, ça ne veut pas dire totale, mais maximale par rapport aux données de connaissance aujourd'hui que l'on peut obtenir grâce à cette identité. Je suis content que Genève ait décidé d'avoir commencé cela déjà il y a longtemps pour pouvoir répondre, indépendamment de la votation dont vous avez parlé, de pouvoir répondre à ce souci de la population.
Absolument. Peut-être vous ne savez pas, mais WISeKey avait été à l'époque, ça fait 20 ans, derrière les projets de votation électronique avec HP, dans laquelle on avait commencé, on a fait une première mondiale. Genève, c'était encore la première endroit au monde dans laquelle on avait fait une votation électronique, chose qui est très complexe et qui montrait déjà l'évolution de cette technologie. Je pense que Pascal, tu veux faire tu as une question, tu viens de m'envoyer un email, tu as une question pour le ministre ou...
Oui, Carlos, je voulais réagir effectivement à ce que M. Poggi a dit. Et bien évidemment, chez IATA, on est entièrement en ligne avec ce que vous venez de dire. Si un État nous donne une identité digitale, c'est quelque chose que nous serons heureux d'utiliser puisque ça, si c'est bien fait, comme vous l'avez dit, ça a plus de bénéfices en termes de sécurité que d'inconvénients. Par contre, on est aussi dans un monde hybride où effectivement, il va y avoir des États, comme on est dans un business global, on va avoir des États qui n'auront pas éventuellement ces solutions digitales. Et c'est pour ça qu'en fait, on propose une solution où effectivement, le passager peut créer en fait une identité, mais c'est simplement une clé qui lui permet d'associer son passeport à un certificat de vaccination, qui lui permet d'associer son passeport à un billet d'avion ou d'associer donc c'est simplement une clé qui permet d'associer les choses. Et c'est lui qui est dans le contrôle, c'est-à-dire au travers de son application, c'est toujours lui en scannant un QR code qui va dire je donne cette identité à quelqu'un qui doit vérifier effectivement si j'ai le bon certificat, à quelqu'un qui doit vérifier mon passeport, à quelqu'un qui... Donc, on est effectivement dans ce concept où c'est toujours le passager qui décide et que les données personnelles restent dans le wallet de son application mobile et c'est tout. Et je pense que c'est effectivement important que la protection des données personnelles soit faite par la gouvernance et ne soit pas faite par une société technologique ou par quelqu'un qui éventuellement voudrait utiliser ces données pour des fins qui ne soient pas liées au processus dont on parle.
Tout à fait. Si vous permettez, en vous entendant, je me disais que finalement, nous avons une population assez schizophrénique, dans le sens où on est très attaché à la protection de nos données, et à juste titre, mais on se rend compte à quel point, dans notre activité de tous les jours, on est très peu regardant sur la protection de nos données personnelles. Il suffit de voir les personnes qui font des achats en ligne, qui sont certainement sécurisés au niveau financier, mais dans lesquels l'ensemble des données sont évidemment transmises. Donc, on se rend bien compte que il faut répondre à cette crainte viscérale, mais qui va, je pense, diminuer avec le temps, parce que c'est aussi un outil nouveau et donc qui génère de la crainte. Et d'un autre côté, une utilisation assez légère de la part d'une grande partie de la population de ses propres données personnelles. Mais enfin, le problème est quand même là. Notre but est d'offrir des moyens sécurisés et ensuite d'accompagner l'utilisation de ces moyens sécurisés de toutes les explications utiles pour rassurer une population qui est intrinsèquement inquiète à l'idée de même savoir qu'il est parti en vacances à Ibiza, alors même qu'il va mettre sur Facebook toutes les photos de ses vacances. Voilà.
Tout à fait. Tout à fait. Mais je pense que l'opportunité est énorme pour Genève, Monsieur le ministre, parce qu'à Genève, on a, dans notre technologie, ça s'appelle le Third Trusted Party, la part troisième de confiance. Ce sont des organismes internationaux qui développent des standards comme l'UIT à Genève, les standards X509, c'est les standards d'identification digitale, c'est eux qui le détiennent. Et c'est un standard mondial dans lequel il y a 160 pays au monde qui sont signataires. Il y a IATA, et on a l'OMS, on a tous les contreparties qu'il faut pour devenir vraiment développer les standards mondiaux. Parce que et ça, on parlait avant de votre arrivée, c'est qu'est-ce qu'il faut faire pour récupérer les mal qui a été fait économique, qui a été fait avec la pandémie. Comment est-ce qu'on peut faire d'un problème un avantage pour permettre les gens d'utiliser les nouvelles technologies comme on fait aujourd'hui. Je suis en train de organiser ça depuis ma maison. Ma compagnie, ça fait 18 mois qu'on travaille depuis chez nous et on travaille très efficacement. Comment est-ce qu'on peut utiliser ça comme un moyen de vraiment de réintégrer les gens dans l'économie et faire grandir cette économie? Et je pense que c'est un point essentiel. Genève, il a une possibilité énorme de montrer les chemins.
Vous avez raison, et je pense que le mot central, celui qui est mis dans cette conférence, trust, hein, c'est build trust, essayer de faire en sorte que cette confiance naisse, même si je pense que cette pandémie a apporté beaucoup d'apprivoisement de ces nouvelles technologies et a permis la construction d'une nouvelle confiance à l'égard de ces moyens. Je ne parle pas que du télétravail, mais enfin, effectivement, maintenant nous sommes en visioconférence. Est-ce que parmi nous, il y a des personnes inquiètes quant au fait que notre image, nos paroles soient détournées à des fins mercantiles ou alors pour nous créer un dommage quelconque? Je pense que non, parce qu'il y a la confiance. Et c'est vrai que construire la confiance, ça fait partie du travail des professionnels. À un moment donné, il va falloir forcer la main d'une partie de la population qui ne viendra pas volontiers dans cette nouvelle technologie, mais qui le fera parce qu'il y aura un avantage. Et grâce à cet avantage, l'apprivoisement et la confiance naîtront. Je pense qu'il ne faut pas attendre de la population majoritairement qu'elle entre volontairement dans ces moyens. Je prends le dossier électronique du patient. Les gens se disent quel est l'intérêt que je peux avoir aujourd'hui que mon médecin traitant, quand je suis hospitalisé, sache immédiatement quand je sors de l'hôpital quel traitement j'ai reçu à l'hôpital. Finalement, je vais attendre que l'hôpital envoie un rapport, peut-être par fax encore, à mon médecin traitant pour lui dire ce que j'ai reçu. Mais quand le patient comprendra que grâce à cela, il pourra sortir plus vite de l'hôpital, être pris en charge plus vite à domicile par des services de soins à domicile, parce qu'il n'y aura pas une rupture dans la prise en charge, mais une continuité grâce à cette continuité de l'information, là, le patient se dira « j'ai intérêt personnellement parce que ma santé en dépend d'entrer dans le système » et ensuite, après l'entrée dans le système, la confiance va naître et se développer. Mais il va falloir, comme les animaux sauvages, il faudra y aller doucement parce que je pense qu'il y a épidermiquement, dans une partie de la population, une crainte, et pas chez les plus jeunes peut-être qui sont nés avec ces instruments, mais chez une partie de la population dont je fais malheureusement partie au niveau de la classe d'âge, pas au niveau des craintes, heureusement, mais il y a effectivement une réticence qu'il va falloir vaincre.
Absolument. Il y a encore un facteur de ces échanges d'informations, c'est la capacité de l'intelligence artificielle de capturer cette information et prévoir le futur, prévoir même des diagnostics. Ce sont des choses que les avantages du partage d'informations. J'avais assisté à une conférence aux États-Unis avec le président Biden, avant qu'il était président. Il disait que quand son fils tombait malade du cancer, lui, il était vice-président des États-Unis. Il avait demandé à tous les hôpitaux et toutes les universités américaines de mettre à disposition la recherche sur les cancers. Ils ne sont pas voulus. Ils se sont dit non, ça c'est des informations en silo et on ne les met pas à disposition. Il disait que s'il aurait eu une aptitude de partager l'information, les algorithmes pourront accéder à cette information et développer des pronostics beaucoup plus fiables, quitte qu'un jour même résoudre les problèmes du cancer. Alors, ce sont les avantages de mettre en place l'information. J'ai un point peut-être que Jeffrey Littman, Jeffrey was the Undersecretary General World Tourist Organization, United Nations Agency, and he's now developing models of using travel and access to country in a sustainable way. I mean, the environmental impact aspect. Jeffrey, I think for the purpose of Minister Poja, I think it will be important for you to describe how you convert, because in Switzerland, we just voted last weekend, and we had some issues about the sustainability efforts that the country needs to do in order to become, as soon as possible, a green-free country. I think your experience on travel will be beneficial, if you don't mind to say a few words about it. Travel and sustainability, which might seem separate issues, but they are actually very complementary. You're mute, Jeffrey. You're mute. You're mute. Yeah.
Is it okay if I speak in English, or would you like me to try my franglais?
English is fine.
Okay. I think people will understand me better. I think I don't want to take it away from the core questions, Carlos, of the information of data and the interoperability of data, and the way which that can become used by consumers. And at the same time, and I want to come back and refer to that in what I'm going to say, but as far as the future of travel is concerned, the future of society is concerned, I'm convinced that we are in one of those, to use a buzzword, paradigm moments. And COVID has let people see just how challenging life is if you are facing some sort of global crisis, and just how much travel and tourism is basically it's like the canary in the old coal mine. It's the first thing which is affected by all of this. And we've seen this happen. People in the industry have spoken about this for many years, but it hasn't really registered, I don't think, with policymakers. And a lot of it has been internal visions of how important the sector is. But what has become clear from COVID is that, you know, the sector is in the middle of the most severe crisis that humanity has experienced, you know, maybe since the last World War. And what has become evident to policymakers during this period is that there's a second crisis which is there, which is the climate crisis, which they're beginning to understand. If it has this kind of an impact, it's going to affect everything that we do in life. And there's been a sort of shift during this period, I think, and it's been greatly helped by the departure of the dreadful previous president of the United States and the re-emergence of the US into the international community, by the realization that if we don't fix the climate crisis, it's going to be like COVID on steroids. And that's why you've seen the issue escalated in the international community, and why there will be a big focus on this at the end of this year in the climate agency's big annual summit, at which they're going to try to make response to the carbon emissions issue a much more committed and serious thing. You've seen court cases in some of the biggest countries, Germany, where governments have been told they're not doing enough in this respect. And you've listened to scientists tell us that whilst the international norm is to keep the global temperature at no more than 1.5 degrees above traditional pre-industrial levels, the reality is that the latest statistics say we've already used 1.2 degrees of that. And we've got 3 more decades to go to 2050. And if we continue on this current path, I think world leaders realize COVID is going to seem very mild. And I think travel and tourism has been decimated by COVID, and travel and tourism, if it continues on its high emission path, even though at the moment it's a relatively small amount of total emissions, it's 3 to 5%. For tourism, it's maybe 5 to 8%. For transport, it's 3%. And with our friend from IATA here, the most exposed element is airlines, because everybody else has an alternative, and airlines don't have an alternative at this moment. So whilst everybody else will be forced by law to put a cap on emissions, forced by law, and I think sooner rather than later, the airlines don't have an alternative fuel. So everybody else will stay at a relatively constant level, and then the air transport component could become as much as 15 to 20%. So what we're doing in the organization that I'm running is we're trying to get the travel and tourism sector to develop what we call climate-friendly travel, that they make a commitment to control their carbon, that they find which of the sustainable development goals best fit their operation, and they bring that into their operating framework. And last but not least, that they actively develop programs to reduce their carbon. Now, having said that, what does that mean in terms of where we are at this moment? It probably means that there's going to be a bigger emphasis on sustainable and green issues at the end of the post-COVID period. The jury is still out on this, because people say things that sound right, and then when things get back to normal, they relapse into their old ways. But if you listen to the strategic policy thinking, there are major shifts towards a less intense, a greener kind of travel future. And that takes me to the final point, which I made a little bit before. What we are working on in the startup Way to Go, and we'd love to be able to talk to other people outside this session about our vision, is think about the poor old passenger. The poor old passenger turns up, plans his trip, and doesn't know the conditions which are going to happen in his destination. He doesn't even know at this moment if things are going to be the same at home as when he left. And listening to Pascal, I think the IATA travel pass can greatly help with this activity. But it's a dynamic situation. And we think that the traveler isn't just going to need that information when they plan their trip, they're going to need it when they're on the trip. And they're going to come to an airport and go to a check-in desk, and they're going to be asked for all sorts of new information on health testing, on vaccination. They're going to have to be considering whether they've had tests before the flight, after the flight. All that information, a lot of it is going to be, all of it is going to be somewhere in some databases digitalized. And we think that there should be a mechanism for the passenger when he gets to the airport to have everything he needs for that trip, or she needs, in one place at the same time. So you don't have to show your health certificate from one digital place and your vaccination certificate from another digital place, and your airline booking in another, because you might have made it with an airline, or you might have made it with a booking engine, and you might have a boarding pass, and you're being asked for this as you come to the desk. And we think there's a whole mass of information which needs to be kept in one place and which needs to be available for the poor passenger. And then to bring this to its conclusion, we think that passenger will be looking for greener options. So in the application that we're planning, the wallet, the Swiss Army knife, as I call it, we're going to make a provision for people to offset their travel with carbon offsets. We're going to allow them to give them information, which is all out there, of the hotels which say we are a green certificated hotel, so that they can have their hotel information when they've gone through all the systems at the border and with the airline, or if they travel on another mode by road at the border, that they can go to the hotel and they know they've got the hotel booking in the same place. And that's, what we believe should happen. We believe there should be interoperability. We think that organizations like IATA are the champions of this kind of thing. I know that from my own time there. But when you're dealing with the public health mechanism, that's not going to be determined by organizations like IATA. That's going to be determined by sovereign governments, because and work together in organizations like WHO. But at the end of the day, governments will stand or fall on their capacity to deal with health issues, and they're going to insist very much that they retain the capacity for their own governance. So, my general comment is that the green stuff is going to become more relevant. People are not going to be able to just talk about it. They're going to have to do it. And at the end of the day, the passenger has to play an important role in this. And that's what we're trying to do with Way to Go. We're trying to empower the passenger so he can see, she can see the challenges that they have when it comes to the public health issues, the opportunities that they have through the airlines, through things like the travel pass, and the capacity that they have to make their trip sustainable. And, I listened to what Vala said on this. It's sustainable when you travel, but it's also sustainable to the places you go to. If you go to emerging countries, If you go to the Seychelles, for example, to small island developing states, they live on their tourism. It's 50-60% of their income, of their GDP. So they will require a sustainable dimension. And you know, we hope that we will be able to work with countries like the Seychelles to give them a tool that will make sure that that people who come will be well aware of the sustainability requirements of the Seychelles, which are very strong.
Thank you very much, Jeffrey. Yeah, absolutely. I think we are entering into a phase where, and this is the idea of the Trust and Innovation Summit, which, by the way, is an initiative of the Geneva State Palexpo, which is the exhibition center in Geneva. It's actually to open the discussion around what the Minister Poja said about trust, because it is not the same, the analog trust, the trust that we do on daily basis with our family or friends, and the digital trust where we are distant, where we are not physically there. Humans need to redesign what digital trust is all about. And digital trust can only happen when tests are done, interoperability. You need to answer all the questions. I mean, it's normal that people want to see privacy issues. They want to see sustainability issues. You know, I just did a roundtable this morning on NFT. Everybody's so excited, but NFT, actually, it's a huge amount of energy is being consumed by NFT. If the NFT becomes what everybody thinks is going to be like mainstream, we're going to have a climate issue on the use of blockchain technology in a mass way. So this kind of equilibrium between stakeholders is something that needs to happen. And the good news is Geneva is full of them. We have all the international organizations. We have the World Economic Forum. We have the CERN, which invented the World Wide Web, was invented in this city. So it is a perfect location to continue this debate and to generate international digital trust, which is not available. And to be honest, and from my experience running in the UN before and after in WISeKey, it is something that will not happen in the United States, will not happen in China, will not happen in other countries. Why? Because trust needs to have some kind of neutrality or some kind of Swiss DNA. And this is the perfect position for us here in Switzerland. So I think it's a debate and we need to continue. I am really happy to have Mr. Poja with us, because I know he's fighting and I know he has been, bringing his vision to a very effective process, including the logistic process, which we didn't cover. We covered with Baya on PMI logistic, but the distribution of the vaccination process to be sure that this goes on time and you do the second dose in the real time. This is very important, and it's a lesson to be transmitted to developing countries, because we have to solve the logistic issues on the vaccination now. Otherwise, it could have a boomerang effect back again to us in the winter. So I don't want to take more of your time because we are by far beyond the time. I just wanted to say that we are really happy with this roundtable. Mr. Poja, I really appreciate your time, especially today. I know how busy you are. And we look forward to have your presence in future debates around this, because your views on how to run a local government, it is very important for us, especially in Geneva. So with that, I would like to close the panel. The organizers are anxious that we do that. We are beyond the time. I'd just like to thank you all for your contributions. And please, let's be in contact for future edition. Thank you very much to Palexpo for organizing Trust Innovation. This is the third success after the blockchain Congress. Then the Palexpo organized is becoming really a thought and leadership forum. And this is exactly what we need in Geneva. So with that, just say goodbye to all of you and safe journey.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Carlos.
Oh,